Solo Leveling versus Delicious in Dungeon. Two of the hottest new anime of 2024 and will extend into 2025. But which of these captures that RPG feel of leveling up, dungeon crawling, that video gamey feel the best? Welcome to OTR Debate, the podcast where three lawyers debate the nerdiest questions while managing to bring it back to the law somehow. And that's right, tonight we're doing Solo Leveling and Delicious in Dungeon. And on one side, there's a man who's always interested in exploring new cuisines.
Hi.
And on the other side, we have a man who's constantly striving for self-improvement. Lando.
Thank you, Moochie. I was a little worried about what you were going to say, considering you asked him if it was okay if you mentioned that he liked cuisines.
And
I think that would be fine.
Yeah.
Do you like food? Yes.
I'm Moochie. I'll be your judge tonight. And before we get started on the debate, let's check the procedural history to see how we got here. Andy, roll the tape.
Today's the day. Wee has to agree with me that Solo Leveling is a great show. There's no way he'll favor Delicious in Dungeons over Solo Leveling. You can't even say the damn name. Delicious in Dungeons, Delicious in Dungeons. You can't even fucking say it. No, he'll definitely tell me he loves it.
I hated it.
Fuck.
Now that we know how we got here, let's start. And as always, the format is going to be openings, and then a series of questions by me, followed by closings at the end. In the middle, we'll maybe take a brief recess, and that's about it. Who wants to get started with their opening?
I can start.
Okay.
An anime that plays like a video game. You're ranked, you have mana, health, skill levels, classifications. This show has it all. If you like that sort of D&D and video game aspect of an anime. Very fun, action-packed. Can't get enough.
Swordsmen, locksmiths, spellcasters, elves, dwarves, dragons. What more could you ask for? Delicious in Dungeon has it all. The story of this anime, Delicious in Dungeon, or D&D for short, follows the story of a group of individuals who are making their way through a dungeon to save one of the main character's sisters. And they all do this while trying to stay alive and sate their hunger by killing monsters and cooking them. So the story details their travels throughout the dungeon, exploring their different environments, different traps, and the monsters that are attacking them, and really goes into detail about cooking and preparing all of these foods that looks really delicious. So I think if you are looking for an anime that will make you hungry and will scratch that itch you have of what monsters might taste like, this is for you.
Well, I gotta say, after those openings, I'm hungry and thirsty for whatever else you guys are gonna say. And if you guys are, if you can relate to these two millennial nerds, hit that subscribe button and help us to level up. Now, I want to go to question one. How does your anime demonstrate its role-playing or video game tropes and inspirations, and how does it set it apart from other fantasy or sci-fi stories? Now, who wants to start?
I could start.
Okay.
Because my first impression of this show, again, as people that have listened to this, our podcast, know this is like my third anime that I've ever seen. And when I started it, there's giant ants, there's swords, there's like, I wasn't sure if we were in medieval times or what the deal was. I honestly didn't know what the hell was going on for at least the majority of the first episode.
Sounds like my parents. They don't know what's going on.
But basically this show, yeah, Seinfeld reference. Basically this show has all the hallmarks and details of basically like a Dungeons and Dragons type game in an anime. Or something like Diablo, if you play Diablo, computer game. Fantastic game. There's mana, health, fatigue, classifications. I mentioned all this in my opening. But basically it's a character that is solo leveling up. You know, so as you would do in a video game or in some kind of role-playing game, your character is assigned certain attributes. You could kind of move those around, strength, intelligence, dexterity, stuff like that. And basically throughout the show, what we see is this character that starts off as like one of the weakest, most pathetic, characters and types of hunters in the show levels up to a point where he is a badass. He is like the male fantasy of, I don't have to work out. I just have to assign strength skill points.
Give skill points to my
Yeah.
stats. I could just
It literally plays out like a video game in that you watch this character, Sun Jinwoo, basically pick out what he wants to do better. Mm-hmm. They also show him working out and stuff, so I don't understand how he's assigning these skill points, but also he's getting ripped.
maybe that helps him like get up to the next level, like gives him XP.
Yes, yes, it does actually. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
You've seen the show.
I have seen the show. Even though I said maybe it does. Just kind of like offering it up, you know?
Yeah. Softball. Thank you.
We?
Yeah. So Delicious in Dungeon.
It's a tongue twister.
Yeah, I really cannot say. I'm going to say a D&D from now on,
Yeah.
I think. So D&D follows the story, like I mentioned, of a party of individuals with different races and also different abilities based on their role in their team. But basically, the main plot is they're trying to save probably like their strongest spellcaster and teammate who's being digested by a dragon. And the group failed to defeat the dragon in the beginning, so they're trying to rush back through the dungeon to save her before she's fully digested. And the subplot, of course, being cooking these monsters that they're fighting, because one of the party members, kind of the party leader, Laios, who is the spellcaster's brother, is most interested in cooking these monsters, and he's so curious on what they taste like.
Yeah.
And the remaining party members kind of reluctantly agree to do so too. And along the way, they find a character who's a dwarf named Senshi, and he has so much experience living in the dungeon and cooking and eating monsters, and he kind of feels this like desire to eat new monsters too. So they make their way through the dungeon. I think the exploration of using the monsters as ingredients, as survival tools is really interesting, because I feel like in a lot of RPGs, you have to go to the store and buy food and carry it with you in your backpack. In my mind kind of just goes to like Zelda Breath of the Wild, where you can purchase food, but it also reminded me when I was watching this anime of playing the game too, because you do cook monster parts as well in your recipes. So it was pretty similar to that. I think it explores some questions of morality, because there are some more like humanoid type of monsters where one of the characters thinks that those should be off limits because they're too close to being, other people, basically.
Yeah.
And they still eat them?
I won't spoil anything. But
They eat
yes.
Yeah, it's like how close does this series get to cannibalism in certain... like how far do they cross that line?
Well, I'll explore some of that later on.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. I think the other thing I wanted to bring up as far as tropes go is kind of the regeneration of the characters.
So I was going to ask about that, because that's the digestion thing. Like,
Yeah.
they need to get to her before she'd be completely gone or something.
Basically, so when different parties die, their bodies are still there, and they have to either be resurrected using like a spellcaster or healer, who has enough mana and like resources to regenerate these folks and bring them back to life. But they can also be like collected basically by corpse hunters, not hunters, but corpse gatherers that go throughout the dungeon at different levels of the dungeon to collect these bodies and bring them back up to the surface, where their party members can pay to like have them brought back to life. But if they're doing that, the bodies still need to be intact. So there are there's the concept of in the dungeon, the souls are trapped with their bodies, so they'll never really be gone. The whole purpose, and they go into this in one of the episodes of like the dungeon is built for death, basically. And so, these bodies are going to be found for the most part. However, in this case, with Fallon, who is a spellcaster who was eaten by the dragon, once she's fully digested and her body's gone, there would be basically no legal way for her to be resurrected.
Oh,
Legal way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Foreshadowing.
Okay.
all right.
So, and I'm gathering because I haven't seen this D&D show, and there are so many similarities. It seems like because I didn't fully explain my world, but I'll get into that a little bit. 10 years ago, these dungeons started appearing everywhere in the modern world, right? So everybody's living peacefully, and all of a sudden these dungeons start showing up out of thin air. Monsters are inside of them. There's treasure, and these hunters are basically, you're like, have a second birth of I'm a hunter, or they're
like
born into being a hunter.
Like a defense force against these monsters. right?
Correct. So they're basically the only ones that could go into these dungeons. Like soldiers can't go in there. Apparently, they, bullets will have no effect on these monsters, but hunters can go, and they're ranked like any other kind of ranking, E through S ranking hunters. And the show, when it first started off and they were explaining the rules of this world, when they said an E ranked hunter wouldn't fare well against like an S class hunter, in my mind, I'm thinking, so like that guy can never beat up that guy. Like it's just
so too weak.
It's just so mind blowing. But then as the show goes on, it's like, oh, because they have these skills where basically one of them is traveling at the speed of light. Yeah, no way is he going to do anything to some other guy that's can barely move. Basically, with these dungeons, I know that you had mentioned how yours kind of work. In this world, if you beat the dungeon boss, the dungeon will eat itself up, everything's gone, and there's no trace of that dungeon. So that is included with the treasures that are in there, the monsters that are in there. I believe the people that are in there. If someone's left in there, they're gone. What happens in the dungeon stays in the dungeon.
All right, so I think that's a good spot to take a brief recess, and we'll go to one of our game segments.
Okay.
And so our mini game this week is interrogatories. And now in the legal world, these are a list of written questions given to the other side in a particular case that they are to answer under oath. For us, it's sort of just our kind of trivia segment where we quiz each other. Lando has questions for we based on Delicious in Dungeon, and we has questions for Orlando based on solo leveling.
And we did give these beforehand. There was
Yes.
paper involved, and it was definitely done.
And now they're electronically recorded in the record here, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll start with a question for we. I'll start with a question for Lando. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So what nickname did the other hunters label Sun Jin-woo before his reawakening? Now the options are World's Dumbest Hunter, World's Weakest Hunter, or World's Best Hunter, sarcastically.
Well, before you stated them out for me, I was going to say World's Hungest Hunter, but I'm going to go with World's Weakest Hunter.
Okay, yeah, that's
Where I
right.
would put all my ability points.
That's correct. So Orlando gets a point.
It's funny when he's like leveling up and he's attributing these skill points to himself. He's like in a hospital and then he's like working out and the nurses are like, oh my God, he's so sexy.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like they didn't see the same guy walk in because now he's all
scrawny.
ripped.
Yeah.
And hum.
And- yeah.
All right, so I was gonna say something about the first Spider-Man movie. Doesn't he like, after he gets his powers and he's like all like buff and everything, doesn't he like look down too and go like smile? In the Sam Raimi
Tobey
Spider-Man.
Maguire.
Yeah. Okay. So then for we, question 1: what YouTuber and Twitch streamer is the voice actor of Laios Tauden? And the options are Mr. Beast, Keston Howard, or Damien Haas.
I'm gonna go with C, Damien Haas.
That's correct. And you're going with Damien just because of your like Sailor Moon connection to.
Oh, his name's Darian, not Damien.
Dang it! I could never remember
But
that.
you know, he was actually. I mean, I know who Mr. Beast is, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't recognize the second choice, and I just took a wild guess on Damien because I'm pretty sure I know who he is.
Okay. So yeah, it's tied.
Okay.
1 point apiece.
All right.
All right. Question 2 for Orlando. What is the name of the stones commonly found in dungeons that naturally light up the area for the hunters? Are they glow rocks, illumination stones, or luminescent stones?
Ooh. I'm going to go with C, luminescent stones.
That's also correct.
All right.
2 to 1. All right. Now the next one
I
for
was going to go with
we?
runes. I thought they were like runes.
stones.
Could be a
runes,
different
similar.
translation.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe. Oh yeah, it could be. Yeah, definitely could be. All right. So,
I do watch a dub.
Yeah.
So
Do they say runes instead? Right?
there's runes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so for what is the name of the dungeon that the party explores in Delicious in Dungeon? Is it A, the tower, B, the island, or C, the castle?
I believe it is Be the Island.
That's also correct. Yes.
Ooh, heating up.
2 to 2. This is going to be 3 to 3. The old tie it all across the board. All right. Finally, for question 3, for Orlando, what is the disease afflicting Sun Jinwoo's mother? Is it deep sleep, eternal slumber, or forever slumber?
It's some kind of slumber.
So not the sleep one, I
Slumber
guess.
Party.
Yeah. Eternal slumber.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
So okay,
Uh-oh.
We've got to get this one. Who does? Well, I guess the tie doesn't. Tie goes to whoever. The
That
audience.
goes to the runner.
we might not even have a tie.
Yeah,
We'll see.
we'll see. Okay, so for the English voice actor for Marcel Donato, Emily Rudd, was in another anime-related Netflix production before Delicious in Dungeon came out. Which production was it? Was it Alice in Borderland? Was it the live-action Death Note movie, or the One Piece live-action?
Ooh. I am going to guess Alice in Borderland.
No,
Ooh.
she's Nami in the One Piece live-action.
Oh, interesting. I haven't seen it, so yeah.
So
I do know who Nami is though.
yeah.
So next time.
Next time you ask that question. So
Yeah.
Lando wins the segment, and we'll move on to question 2.
Thanks.
Okay, so for question 2, I think we have 2 anime with some great fight scenes, battles, bosses. So what is the best boss battle or fight of your series, and what makes it so exciting, emotional, epic, whatever you can think of? Who wants to start with this one?
I can start.
Okay.
I've got 2 boss battles, and I guess one is a boss battle and one is another kind of like side battle that happens in a dungeon. The first one being essentially this just human person, this hunter, that starts off as potentially an ally that joins them in a party to, check out a dungeon, see what they can get, kind of clear it out, get the treasure, all that stuff. Turns out this man, Kang Tae Sheeks, is insane. And so he brings these convicts with him basically to kind of fill up the party and for them to be able to actually enter the dungeon, and he kills them. He just kills them because he's hired by a man who lost his daughter to these convicts. So they were going to be released. He's like, no, take care of them in the dungeon. He does. But some of the members from the dungeon party catch on to him. They see what's going on. He kills them. So then the protagonist in the show, confronts him. They get into it. This guy's like, no, like killing monsters is fun and all, but I like killing humans. And he just goes insane.
Oh man.
So there's this fight. He's of a higher level than Sun Jinwoo, and they just go at it. Jinwoo kicks the shit out of him, kills him there. So he's kind of a murderer too. Not really. But the boss battle that really, I think for the first season at least, second season is currently going on right now, but big boss battle in the first season would be, in my opinion, episode 11, the Blood Red Knight. So it's this, knight in red armor that is guarding this empty throne. And so when Sun Jinwoo sees him, he's like, okay, what's this guy's deal? He's overpowered. But at this point, he's already been leveling up for so long. He's kind of cocky. He starts getting his ass kicked. He's like hitting with all these punches, like all these combos, flying all over the place, but he's getting a whooping. And he is...
Jinwoo is getting
Yeah,
whooping?
he's getting a whooping. He's like not touching the ground for a good solid minute of action, and he's just getting his ass whooped. He's getting his teeth clobbered. But then, when all hope seems lost, he somehow pulls it out of his ass, like always.
Pulls what out of his ass?
A win, a W. He becomes this like psychopath and just starts stabbing the shit out of the Blood Red Knight, and beats him and levels
Sword
up.
up his ass.
So that pretty epic boss battle in the show, and yeah, it's a good one.
Climactic seems like one of the
Oh, yeah.
last episodes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Cool.
There's 12 episodes of the first season, so
second to last.
yeah.
Like big boss battle then. Any good fights?
Yeah, I think before I get into my favorite boss battle, I do want to just do a couple honorable mentions of dishes and monsters that were related to them. So the first one I just want to mention is the exorcism sorbet to drive away evil. I don't know if you remember, but there were basically all these ghosts in the dungeon, and Senshi kind of concocts this holy water made out of the treasure bugs in a jar. And rather than like sprinkling the water on the ghosts, like one would think, he just keeps it in the jar and like ties ropes to it and swings it around at the ghosts. And so kind of like exorcises them. But in the meantime, because the ghosts make the temperature drop, because there are so many ghosts and they're all attacking with the jar, it kind of freezes and the holy water turns into this sorbet.
Oh.
So that looked really good. To be honest, I wanted to eat that. I think the other one,
There's got to be like a recipe book, right?
They
there
probably
is
should-
there
oh,
is a
there's
book that Laios has that kind of discusses different
No, like,
I think he
monsters.
needs a real one in the real world.
Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think they probably would do something like that.
'Cause
if
the-
they haven't already, yeah.
Yeah, the One Piece recipe book that
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah,
I'm sure
thank
there's
you.
another one for this, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, all the dishes they make are pretty like iconic Japanese dishes a lot of times, or
Just
Western
like
dishes
monster
too.
meat instead, yeah.
Yeah, so there's like katsu and like chawanmushi and
Right.
things like that. And chawanmushi is the other dish, which is like a steamed savory custard. In the show, this version of it was the ice golem savory egg custard that Senshi basically reveals that he's been kind of domesticating these golems and using them to grow vegetables because they're all made of dirt and stuff, and they have like the best humidity and like soil quality and stuff like that. And it's, I think for Marcel, she's so excited because she gets to eat vegetables and not monster
Yeah.
flesh, because she's kind of like on the fence
Picky
about
on it,
eating
yeah.
monsters. So that's those are the kind of two honorable mentions I wanted to bring up. I think going back to one of my things that I foreshadowed about cannibalism earlier, there is some exploration of that. For example, with like the fishmen, what are like kind of like mermaids, but their upper body's fish.
With the upper body.
Yeah.
So
Well,
opposite?
actually, how it was depicted in the anime, their whole body is fish, but it's like they're more like man-looking fish. I don't know. Anyway, there's like seaweed that they use as hair, and Laios uses it to cook, but doesn't reveal to Marcel that there are like fisherman eggs in the seaweed that he uses. So I think for Marcel, that would be completely off limits, and they kind of like make fun of her for not knowing, because she's like, "Oh, we haven't eaten any like humanoid creatures." But unbeknownst to her, they did eat the eggs of like what would be more, she would consider more to be humanoid. And Chochuk, the like half-foot locksmith guy, he knows. But they also have like these dryad fruits, which are kind of very human looking, And so even when they're eating the dish, there's like a pumpkin bowl with the face on it, and they're just like, that's kind of horrifying. Which is funny. But I think the true cannibalism part I wanted to get to is towards the end of the series, end of the first season. It's with the hippogriff and the griffin scene. So, this whole time, Senshi is so knowledgeable because he lives in the dungeon. He has so much experience about monsters and eating monsters. But we don't know that much about him. And so in this episode, they kind of show a lot of his backstory of how he first came to the dungeon with other dwarves, and how he was really young and inexperienced and they didn't like him. And one by one, each of these dwarves start disappearing. Ultimately, it's like the last three dwarves. One of them, two of them get in a fight because one of them thinks he's dead weight and wants to get rid of him. The other one wants to protect him because he's young. And there's a griffin back then in the past. And it flash forward to the future. There's also a griffin now. And Senshi's like super terrified of it. Anyway, it later is revealed that in the past, the dwarves that were fighting about him, after they finally disappeared, the last dwarf cooks him a meal, a soup with like this kind of mystery meat. It's kind of alluded to that it might have been the other dwarf that he killed to protect him. And this whole time, I don't remember if it was decades or centuries or something like that, but it's this whole time like weighing on him, on his conscience of like, did I eat another dwarf?
Yeah.
And so in the future, back to the present time, they kill the griffin. They make a soup with the upper half of the body and the lower half of the body because, they're two different animals. It's half eagle, half lion. So they have two different soups. He eats it. It's not quite the same. He's only had that soup. He ate a lot of that soup along in the past, but he's never had it again. And in his mind, he wants to like taste it again to confirm that it wasn't another dwarf, basically.
Yeah.
So he's like kind of conflicted still because the griffin doesn't taste like the soup that he had in the past, both the upper and the lower bodies.
He remembers the soup from so long ago?
Because, if you eat another human, I feel like you'd remember that taste forever. You might even crave it. But then Laios sees changelings, where these kind of like mushroom monster things in a circle that where if you pass anything through it, it kind of changes the DNA structure of whatever that is into something else. So he has a good idea and puts the griffin meat in the circle of changelings, and it changes into hippogriff meat. And hippogriff is different because it's half eagle, half horse. So they make soup again with that, and Senshi tastes it and is like, all of these years that have been burdening him and the stress gets relieved because it tastes like the soup that he had in the past. So ultimately, he comes to terms with the fact that he did not eat another dwarf, thankfully. And I think that was just such a moving scene, and I think very emotional that we finally get to know what Senshi's past is. Because this whole time when I was watching it, it's like, is he a bad guy? We don't really know that much about him. He's kind of mysterious. But yeah, so that was like probably one of my favorite scenes. I think the action scenes were pretty cool too, because Marcel creates these like fake monsters to help attack and kill the griffin initially. And like the action scenes are cool, but I think the emotion behind it was a lot more touching for me.
Okay, cool. All right, so for question 3, why is your position legally better? You can show this through circumstantial evidence, which is still evidence, by the way, in that it's indirect evidence that suggests a fact exists, by providing a chain of circumstances that lead to a reasonable inference. So, for example, you can tell me how in these realities, how would a criminal or civil case play out? Or you can tell me a key scene from your show and how that might lead to legal liability and what defenses there might be. So, whoever wants to go ahead.
I could go. So basically, to answer your question, I'm just going to ask a lot of other questions. Because the world of these dungeons popping up, where what happens in the dungeon stays in the dungeon.
Is that the tagline of the show?
It really is. When I said it the first time, I'm like, this is going to be for the legal question. That just brings out all sorts of, problems and issues in the real world, because there's treasure down there, there's monsters down there, there's these hunters that are essentially superheroes that could get away with whatever, depending on their rank and class and everything like that, right? So they have these skills that they can like move super fast. They could be super strong. There's a guy that's like, they show him training and he is knocking the shit out of a boulder that's like the size of a big room, you know? So these guys are unstoppable, and they go into a dungeon. Anything can happen. And when that dungeon's closed up, there's no evidence of anything. Okay, so I've kind of already mentioned basically the serial killer that was down there. You know, he were to come out, everyone's dead in there. The outside world's going to think, okay, well, they died. Hunters die in those dungeons. And the military and police officers and everybody that, you know, that's not a hunter can't go into a dungeon. They have strict regulations as to how many people in the dungeon party can actually go into a dungeon. What kind of class is this dungeon? So if he came out after killing all those people, there would probably be no investigation. There is another situation where Jinwoo confronts this dungeon team that he was with. They try to basically screw him over along with one of his buddies that was down there. And they try to basically set them up. Like, we're going to steal all these riches. Your bud that came in with all this really expensive armor, we're going to steal his shit, steal some of the loot here. Then this is going to get closed up. That big boss spider is going to kill you guys. No one's going to be the wiser. You know, little did they know, Jinwoo is like really powerful at that point. They just thought he was an E-class hunter. He kills them. They're out of there. You know, it's mentioned later on that it was self-defense, but really, you know, what kind of investigation is going to happen when that thing closes up? So when I was thinking about this, you know, these are all issues for the criminal world. But if you were to take it to the civil world, where you could potentially reform this society and reform this world to hold the corporations that employ these hunters, tax them, you know, put these regulations, like if something goes down in there, we're going to investigate your company. Maybe things would tighten up a little bit and there wouldn't be these kind of problems, because corporation wouldn't want to lose all this money that they're getting from the dungeon in the first place. Maybe there could be some kind of penalties, civil penalties on these hunters that go in there to, you know, stop them. Because, I mean, you could try to jail them, but if they're really powerful, you're not going to be able to hold them, right? So you affect their wallet, might change things a little bit. So I just thought it was something that was interesting in this world of essentially these monsters, these superhero type people. How would they be affected, and what would actually be effective to deal with these kind of issues?
We can't escape corporate greed, even in a fantasy dungeon world.
Yeah.
So, is that something that comes up in your?
Well, no, I don't think there's really a corporation that's introduced in D&D, but the legal issue I really wanted to talk about, and the primary legal issue that's explored in D&D is kind of the strict prohibition of ancient magic. And they don't really reveal that much information yet in season 1 about kind of the backstory, the ancient history of ancient magic. But they do kind of allude to it being super powerful, that it can like summon very powerful monsters. And I guess that's kind of illustrated with Marcel, who is the spellcasting elf in the party, because she resurrects Farron using ancient magic. And spoiler alert, she was fully digested by the dragon. So they find her bones. You know, it's a little too late. They didn't save her in time. But because Marcel is revealed to be an expert in ancient magic, you know, she went to magic school with Farron, and it's not really shown up until that point, like what Marcel's like strength is. But it turns out that she knows ancient magic. She can read ancient Elvish. So she uses a dragon meat and a lot of her mana to resurrect Farron, but it kind of goes a little haywire, and she turns into a chimera and stuff later on. But the legality of it is kind of explored a little bit by Shuro, who is an old party member, a man from the East, because he finds out like how she was resurrected and everything, and he wants to report her when they go back to the surface to the elves of the West. And so, don't really know what the enforcement mechanism is for using ancient magic yet. I think I'm very excited to see what happens in season 2. If they explore more, kind of, and go more into like the elves of the West being like the rulers. And seeing like how they might punish her if they find out that she has ancient magic. A lot of the side characters, not in their party, also find out that she's used ancient magic because they overhear like kind of the explanation of the resurrection and everything. There's also like an element of like evidence in there where the magic circle she used to resurrect her is very clearly like ancient magic. And at one point they're like, or a couple times they're like, yeah. They say like, oh, we erased that circle, but they clearly did not erase the circle. And the other character, who at least up until this point, at this time of record, has used ancient magic is the Mad Mage, who is,
I mean, it's just in the name.
yeah. So he's kind of like the ruler of the dungeon, basically. And if you destroy him, then I think you like get ownership of the dungeon or whatever. You control the dungeon. But ultimately, it's like those two characters have been shown to use ancient magic. So, his ancient magic is really like creating this dungeon, and you see like the bottom level where they're at kind of shifting around, and like they have to figure out like the patterns of how it's moving so they can get out of there. But it's just, it's shown to be very strong, but we don't really know like what the consequences are of using it yet.
Okay. Okay, I think I've heard enough in terms of your evidence so far. Why don't you give a brief closing where you pinpoint certain things to attack on the other side, certain negatives, but with actual facts to back you up, not just your own unsupported personal opinions.
Sure. I'm going to get very personal about this.
As long as you support it.
Yeah.
So solo leveling, I think, just fits this type of debate and this episode more than D&D. So D&D plays out kind of like a cooking show in anime form, and then the RPG stuff is kind of on the back burner. Whereas with solo leveling, you've got the health, you've got the mana, you've got the dungeons, you got the monsters, you got the treasure, you have him leveling up with his attributes. He's like kind of strengthening himself up. He is, adding skill points and learning different skills, like dash is in there. There's like a fury in there. I think there's like lustful kill is in there. Like all these things that, you see in a video game where it's like, oh, I'm going to learn this skill, and it's, you push a button or a combination of buttons or something, and it performs this act. That's what you see in solo leveling, and I don't think you really see that in D&D.
Yeah, I don't think that we have like these ability points and stuff, but it sounds like he's learning how to run, how to be angry, and be filled with lust. I mean, the thing that he doesn't have is a party. And I think for me, if I were somehow transported into this campaign to like go on a mission and a quest, I would want to do it with my friends, with a party. And I think that D&D really highlights the importance and the fun in having people around you with different abilities, with different personalities, different knowledge bases. And I think that's the true strength of D&D, is that it has more than just one character leveling up by himself.
Over and over again.
Exactly. They go on different missions. They kind of learn from each other. They learn how to navigate through different monster fights. They learn how to cook. They narrate their cooking. And I think that it all together combined creates a more cohesive story. And it's just a lot more interesting too.
All right. Yeah. So having heard both your closings and the rest of what you've argued today, I have to say that before coming in today, having seen both these shows, they're kind of even for me. But I think with the way that we detailed some of these aspects of Delicious in Dungeon, there are episodes that I want to go back to and watch again and see they cook this thing or they deal with this thing or Senshi's past that's explored in an emotional way. And I kind of think with Delicious in Dungeon, I don't know if I'm going to go back and watch like the episodes where he gains these set number of skills or whatever. It all kind of seems to be
For solo leveling.
for solo leveling. Yeah. Sorry. Did I say the same thing again?
Yeah,
Yes.
you did.
Oh, okay. But I don't think I'm going to go back to certain episodes of that. But I'm already like thinking of episodes I want to watch in Delicious in Dungeon, which I think kind of
Probably the sorbet
gives
one.
the win. The sorbet one, yeah.
If you watch it on 1.5 speed like I did, you could just rewatch the entire
Yeah, I
season.
could watch it. Like I might do that. But I like the aspect of the party. I like the aspect of in having that Dungeons and Dragons element to it or inspiration to it. You have a party there a lot of the times, and you there are different roles that each party member has, and it's also not all just combat. There might be some cooking or things like that. So I like those elements to it, and I think Delicious in Dungeon gets the win this time. So
Thank you.
point to we.
Is right.
Is right. And on that note, thank you for watching and listening to OTR Debate.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, so I think I've heard enough, and let's briefly close. Each of you give a brief attacking closing of the other side, but supported by some actual facts and background and not just unsupported not political opinions, unsupported opinions. Personal opinions is what I was trying to say.
Okay. Let's get political on this one.
Yeah, don't unsupported though. No unsupported political opinions.